Last September, I sent my last-born to his last year of college. Now, I've been a single mom since my kids were 2 and 5. I took care of them 6 days a week, every week, and I loved every minute of it. But I never had a thing about empty nest. And if anybody ever said to me, what are you going to do about the empty nest? I'd say, it is free flight. We are all independent, we're doing what we're supposed to be doing, and I'm good with it. The most brilliant thing Jacobs College ever did, and I've never heard of this in any other college, was to create a parents' listserv. So we're all on email together. And this is so we can helicopter each other instead of helicoptering our children while they're supposed to be growing up. I think it's also so we can helicopter each other instead of helicoptering the administration, because I know they don't want to hear from us. But last September, 2012, I noticed that the tone on the listserv had changed. Often, we would email each other about really critical things like, does this dorm room have a closet? And last September, other parents of last-borns entering their last year of college were writing things that sounded like, where has the time gone? And what have I done with my life? So last October, also 2012, I went to my 40th high school reunion. And all I want to say about that is, man, those people have gotten so old. In November of 2012, I lost one of my best friends of 40 years. And you know how that can be difficult, soul-searching. And what I realized was, as I looked at the meaning of time and friendship, that we all make new friends all the time in our lives, and things go on. But no matter how many friends I make at this age and stage, it is highly unlikely that they will still be my friends in 40 more years. So in December, I decided I needed to change something, and I started thinking about warm weather and beaches and speaking Spanish. I don't, but I've always wanted to. So I'm a consultant, and I don't organize closets, I organize organizations. And relevant to this story is the fact that I have a specialty in diversity and inclusion, and I was feeling a little like even burned out with that. So what was I going to do different? I started thinking about Nicaragua, I started thinking about Guatemala, Costa Rica I'd been to, it seemed a little too tame, and I didn't know what I wanted to do, but in January, things really started hopping. I got a call from one of my best friends in high school, whom I'd reconnected with at the reunion after something like 25 years. And she called to wish me a Happy New Year. Randomly, she too was thinking about going someplace warm, beachy, and Spanish-speaking. So we got really psyched. We both had birthdays in February. You know, it sounded like a great deal. She mentioned Ecuador. Now, Ecuador, I kind of thought equator, and that's about all I knew. Who knows from Ecuador, right? So it sounded great to me. She'd heard wonderful things about it. We got psyched. We started talking about it, and the next day she called, and she had found her passport in a drawer, and it was expired. No way could she renew it in time for us to take a trip. And from being a consultant, I had a lot of flexibility, and I knew that I could go early February to early March, but that was going to be about it. So I was on my own again, and I had a renewed commitment because we almost had something. But how was I going to do this? I had no idea. The parents' listserv suddenly starts hopping. How many of you remember Beasts of the Southern Wild, the film? You all saw it, a marvelous film. Well, it happened to be made by 30 graduates of the film department at my son's university. So the parents are going, ooh, I know so-and-so, and ooh, have you seen this review? And everybody's talking about it, and it's overwhelming. So all I do is like look at the preview pane and try and get through my email, and lo and behold, in the preview pane, there is an email that says, and I even get to see this film in Ecuador. So I write to Betty, this parent, and I say, would you be willing to answer some questions? And Betty says, of course, and not only does she answer my questions, but she has an eco-lodge and organic farm in the Andes just outside of Quito. So I have a place to land. Not that this minimizes my anxiety, mind you. It's not a place I can afford for very long. It's quite the luxury place. But also, as I get closer and closer to thinking about this, I realize that I haven't been out of the country for an extended period of time without my children since I was 21 years old. So I'm nervous and I'm trying to figure out what to do. And I, meanwhile, have connected with another friend from high school who lives in Ogden, Utah. And she wants me to come out for the Sundance Film Festival, to go for a weekend. And I had committed to her. So I've got to get on an airplane when I can't figure out how am I going to get this trip going. February and March are coming up very quickly, but I'm on the airplane and I'm just all in a tizzy. I'm really anxious and I have no idea how I'm going to do this. So I get to Ogden, we go to some films, and Judy takes me not just to films, but to her yoga class with her yoga instructor named Hope, who has us stretch in ways that we have never stretched before and assume poses that we've never tried in our history. And then she reads a poem and gives us a question to discuss. What parts of yourself are you willing to give up in order to be who you wish you were? I leave yoga class, and before the next film, I get online and I buy a ticket from Colorado Springs to Quito, February 9th to March 9th. I'm going. And you'd think I'd rest with it, right? But no, it makes me even more nervous. So I buy trip insurance in case I want to chicken out. But I'm determined that if I chicken out, it's going to be a conscious chickening out. I'm not going to chicken out unconsciously. So I get back home and I make an appointment with my doctor for a travel consult, right? It's not going to be because I missed a vaccination. So I go into the doctor's office, and every time I do anything about getting ready for this trip, I'm anxious as I can be. And I go in, and the nurse says, come, let's just weigh and measure you. So, I go in, and I get weighed, and I get measured, and it's all the normal routine, and I step off the scale 2 inches, right? And I stub my toe, and it hurts like heck. And I didn't realize it at the time, but I actually broke a bone in my foot. So in case anyone has any doubt about my ambivalence about moving forward in life, let that now be dispelled. I get into the examining room and I see the doctor is not my favorite doctor whom I adore. It's the backup doctor who is not my favorite and whom I don't adore. And after congratulating me for being so brave and then telling me I'm so crazy for going to a country like Ecuador, he tells me I have to have a typhoid vaccine and he wants me to take the oral vaccine. And I say, no, I'm not taking the oral vaccine. It's live. There are too many side effects. And he says, well, you can't get the injectable vaccine in Colorado Springs. Well, I think we were talking earlier, liar, liar, pants on fire. But that's another story. You can actually get the vaccine in town, but I start taking the live vaccine, and within 2 doses of the 4 required, I have all of the symptoms of typhoid. And I won't go into detail about those here, but they amount to not keeping anything in any which way, and I start losing weight. Now, people hate me for this, but losing weight is not a good thing for me. So I've got the foot thing, I've got the stomach thing. Meanwhile, Betty has turned me over to someone named Diego. Diego is supposed to be figuring out my ride from the Quito airport, where I'll be landing late at night, a woman alone in a big airport, not speaking the language, travel advisory, right? So Diego's supposed to be helping me figure that out, and Diego I can't reach, not by email, not by phone. Betty, meanwhile, has dropped off the planet and doesn't answer email either. And it's about 10 days out, and I suddenly realize I only have 1 pair of glasses. And so my daughter, who is a much better traveler than I am, says, so what if you only have 1 pair of glasses? What happens if you break your glasses? And I say, well, won't go outside. I won't be able to read people's body language. I won't be able to see their nonverbals. I'll have to stay in the hotel. And she says, so get another pair of glasses. And I say, but they're expensive. They're like $200 or $300, and I'm spending so much money, and I'm not going to be paid while I'm gone, and I'll just be really careful. So the next day, I go to Army-Navy surplus to find a duffel bag. And they don't have my duffel bag, but they do have a couple of little things. So I buy the little things, and I go, and every time I do something for this trip, I'm just like, wired, and distracted. And I open the passenger door of my car, and I put my packages in, and I take my purse off my arm and put it on the seat and proceed to slam my own head in the car door. For real. Not my whole head, not enough to really hurt me or to knock some sense into myself. It's just that front part of my head that has my glasses. And so they are scratched right across the bifocal line. So I go to the glasses store, and at this point, it's way too late for them to make me new bifocals, so they make me a very expensive pair of monofocals, which I can only use in an emergency if something really happens to now my scratched glasses. So by the time I pick them up, it's like the day before I'm supposed to leave. I haven't canceled yet, but I still could. And I have the duffel bag. I'm working on it. I have a lousy house sitter who is kind of creepy, and I realized, oh my God, I don't have the batteries I need for the water purifier, and everything is crazy. I'm shopping until 11 o'clock at night, and I'm packing until even later, and I lie down in bed with all of my clothes on for 15 minutes and do not sleep a wink. And then it's 4 a.m., and the cab is there. So I take my broken foot with the foot plate in my shoe and my funky stomach with the bag of supplements that's supposed to help with that, and my blurry vision, and I get in the cab and go to the Colorado Springs airport. Now, if I was going to Quito from the East Coast, doesn't matter, New York, Florida, 5-6 hours in an airplane, and I'm there. From Colorado Springs to Quito is 3 long flights crisscrossing the country with 2 long layovers in these airports. So I get into Quito at 9 p.m., still not having slept. And I get into customs and I think, how am I going to do this? I don't speak Spanish. And I find my duffel bag, and the TSA approved lock has not been cut off. It's been ripped off. And my duffel bag is much lighter than when I checked it. So I get finally through customs, and the big metal doors of the old Quito airport open, and I see a man with a sign, and it's got my name on it. It's my ride. And so I meet Gustavo, and I realize Gustavo isn't alone. Gustavo has another man with him. And so I give them my luggage and follow them out to this old but immaculate Jeep. And one of them says, "Are you hungry? Have you eaten?" And I say, "No, I haven't eaten a thing," and it's the truth. So they call ahead to the casa and say, "I'll need some food," and they proceed to put everything in the car, and I climb in the back seat, and we head off down the Pan American Highway at night in the rain. And what I see are cliffs and mountains and foliage of types I can't identify, and they come looming in out of the rain into the headlights, and then they recede in the back, and I feel like I'm on another planet. Turns out the other guy in the car is Gustavo's son, who Gustavo brought because the son speaks English. What we discovered is that other than numbers and colors, Gustavo speaks the same exact words in English that I speak in Spanish, and the total number of them is about 8. So We drive 2 hours on this windy, wet Pan American highway, and finally they turn off onto a hand-laid stone road, and we bump about a mile up an Andean slope, and then they turn into a driveway, and we bump down into the parking area. They let me out of the car. Gustavo's son heads off with my luggage to some room I haven't seen, and Gustavo ushers me into the dining room. So I go in through these big wooden doors, through a little tiled office with a little desk, and down some stairs, through a cloth curtain, and I'm in a communal dining room. Now, it's 11:30 at night. No one else is in there, but there are these large tables, long, beautiful, dark wood tables. And Gustavo seats me at the head of one, and then he leaves. And I look around the room, and I see that it is made of an Ecuadorian type adobe, so mud and straw. It's been whitewashed, painted white in the colonial Spanish style, and it's got these beautiful arched windows, and there's a gentle light being given off by this round kiva fireplace in the back, and a couple of lamps, low lamps, and I see the room is filled with art and music. The art on the walls are beautiful indigenous weavings and drawings. There's incredible modern and classical paintings of European style. There are colonial conquistadores weapons, antiques that are showcased on the wall. There's a piano. There's the Andean flutes and wind instruments in a corner, and indigenous drums, and a couple of guitars and a banjo. And I take my first breath in at least a week, but probably a month. And I think I'm going to be able to relax. And at that moment, through the double kitchen doors comes a man who I can only describe as extraordinarily distinguished looking. He's dignified, he has black hair, a lined but beautiful face, graying temples, and Ecuadorians aren't tall, but he carries himself with this regal bearing. And he's wearing a ruffled apron, and he's carrying my food. And I think, oh my God, my stomach, can I drink the water? What am I going to do? How am I going to handle this? And he sets the plate in front of me, and it's enchiladas mole. It's chicken enchiladas with rich, dark, thick Ecuadorian chocolate on top. And I dig in. So he comes and sits next to me and says, "Hola, I'm Diego." Diego, it turns out, is the ex-husband of Betty. They own the inn together. And he didn't know about any listserv, but we do have children and university in common, and we begin this conversation. He was a translator in the United States for a long time. He speaks better English than I do, and it's a lovely conversation. And when there's a lull, I say, and so is the inn your primary work, or do you have other work? And he says, casually and modestly, as if he's saying, yes, I also take care of the horses. He says, I'm the Assistant Minister of Human Relations for the Department of the Interior. And I say, suddenly feeling my brain and all the hours it hasn't been functioning well, oh. And what are your responsibilities there? And he says, as if he's saying, they eat oats and hay. He says, I'm responsible for eliminating human trafficking, eliminating violence against women, and I rewrote the Constitution 6 years ago. And I say, I mean, did you even know Ecuador had a new constitution? I didn't know Ecuador had a new constitution. And so I say, what was that like? And he says, again, very modestly, well, we started by getting all private interests out of government. We started by getting all private interests out of government? I think I'm home. So Ecuador has an amazing constitution. Did you know that they're the first country in the world to constitutionally protect the rights of nature? They have the most inclusive, culturally respectful language from preamble to last period that I've ever seen in any document. And it's not just ethnic and cultural diversity that they're respecting. They have so many diverse areas in the country and so many different indigenous people and people who were brought as slaves to the area and the colonial interests that have maintained power. It's not just about diverse socioeconomic status. They have gender equity. They have sexual orientation in their constitution. It's one of the most incredible documents I've ever seen. And from that moment, I knew that magic really happens. And every place I went in the country, every person I met, I saw the most amazing things. I met a shaman who I understood, even though he and I didn't speak the same language, in detail. I went to a cloud forest and heard a frog concert, and I even did get to a beach. And what I learned from this, it's informed my work, and I hope it informs my life for the rest of my life. I learned that change is really hard, and it doesn't have to be as hard as we make it. And I learned that free flight isn't just about spreading your wings, it's sometimes about taking the frigging leap.